It's a small finger, a worm.
Like a dagger?
Tiny sword.
Breadstick.
Matchstick.
A lamppost.
Coin slot. No.
10 seconds.
A stick, a walking stick,
the
a
Eiffel
boundary,
Tower.
Mount Kilimanjaro, big small.
Sorry. It's a tandem bicycle.
What?
What?
It was a tandem bicycle. How did they not get that? This morning we're going to talk about diligence and laziness, and one of the major themes and words that's used throughout the Proverbs to describe laziness is slothfulness. The clear subject matter of the commercial there is the slowness of the sloth, which frustrates his guessing teammates and at the same time provides us with comedic gold. It's fantastic. They move at a glacial pace, so he's not even able to get the first line drawn before the bell rings a half minute in or a whole minute in. Now, contrary to all evidence that you've seen thus far, we're still in Proverbs this morning. And it's a book that's full of contrast between wise and foolish people. The wise listen to instruction, fools disregard advice. The wise are full of integrity, but fools ooze falsehood. The wise cling to purity, while fools revel in adultery. The wise make careful plans, and fools throw caution to the wind. And this morning, we're considering another area in which Solomon has warned his son to be cautious about the way he walks, to choose diligence over laziness, to choose diligence over laziness. So, why the video of the sloth? Because words are powerful. There's almost a which came first here, a chicken or the egg. Was the sloth named first and then the word came? Or, well, the sloth was named second. Words are powerful, and so much so that when the sloth was discovered in the Central American rainforest, those who discovered it were so amazed by its remarkable laziness that they were compelled to name it after the Hebrew concept of sloth. They said, "We have never seen anything on earth that demonstrates slothfulness more than this thing, so it is now forever known as sloth." Don't think that the lazy man is somehow like the comical mammal that you saw in the commercial there, right? Somehow slow-moving yet charming in his own right. There are those people in our life where we excuse their behavior because that's just who they are, right? In my circles, people say, well, that's just Greg. That's the way he is, right? But laziness isn't something that we can excuse, that we can just brush off and laugh off. The lazy man is literally sloth-like, a beast that is unhelpful and uninterested and cannot be roused from his slowness. So too, the Proverbs describe him as a sluggard. And you know what animal we've named after that? The lazy man is not a pretty picture to look at. He's either like a sloth that you can't get to move or go anywhere or be interested in anything, or he's slow and utterly disgusting. He is slug-like. So this morning we're going to talk about laziness and diligence. And as a slight preamble to that, I should confess that mostly, guys, I'm talking to you this morning. For whatever reason, guys tend to struggle with laziness, and women are, for whatever reason, more diligent. And I know that my wife and probably several of you are thinking, well, we have to be diligent because you're so lazy. But the culture has spoken on this. Homer is lazy. Marge is not lazy. Marge is diligent. Ray Barone is lazy. Deborah Barone is not lazy. She is diligent. So if you feel it's slightly askew this morning, know that I feel like I have been looking in a mirror all week. As I have studied the lazy man, I have become desperately convicted that it is an area in which I am wholly inadequate and desperate for him to change me and make me more diligent. And no one knows that more than my wife. So we are going to be in Proverbs chapter 24, along with some other areas, page 546 in the Pew Bible, Proverbs chapter 24, verses 30 to 34. Solomon gives us a brief account of walking through the streets of Jerusalem, maybe outside the gates of Jerusalem. And we come to Proverbs chapter 24, verses 30 to 34. Solomon writes, I passed by the field of a sluggard, by the vineyard of a man lacking sense. And behold, it was all overgrown with thorns. The ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and considered it. I looked and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a robber, and want like an armed man. So the first thing I want you to see here is that the lazy man, the sluggard, the slothful man is wasteful. Look at verse 30. I passed by the field of a sluggard, by the vineyard of a man lacking sense. The field is his. The vineyard belongs to him. This guy is a landowner. God has given to him resources of land and the ability to produce on that land something that will provide for himself and for his family and perhaps for the community that surrounds him. And yet, he has done nothing with it. God has put him in this place to be a steward, and he has wasted his opportunity. He's accomplished nothing and seems to have no intent to do anything with it. It's interesting that Solomon describes him there at the end of the verse as a man lacking sense. And clearly he is, right? He's not interested in profit, right? Here he's got a field with which he can grow things and sell them. He can develop a business. He can have employees. He can provide for his family. He can make a profit. And he seems to not be interested in that. He's not even interested in some measure of vanity, right? We all want our yards to look at least somewhat presentable. He's not even interested in someone walking past and saying, that is a gorgeous vineyard. That piece of property is amazing. It's beautiful. I could look at that all day long. He's not even interested in the vanity of someone thinking, the guy who owns that must be a really fine person. And I think ultimately where Solomon goes is that this man lacks sense because of verse 34. Poverty will come upon him like a robber and want like an armed man. He lacks so much sense and he's so wasteful that he doesn't even care that he's the one that's going to take the brunt of it. He's not even interested in self-preservation. He's the one that's going to suffer, and so he lacks sense in his wastefulness. Second, he's indifferent and defeated. Verse 31, and behold, it was all overgrown with thorns, the ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. And to those three steps, Solomon matches it in verse 33. It was all overgrown with thorns, and what's his response? A little sleep. The ground was covered with nettles, and what's his response? A little slumber. The stone wall was broken apart, and his response is a little folding of the hands to rest. Now we see here that what's grown up in the place of the vine that's supposed to produce fruit. Instead, he's allowed weeds to grow up that trellis and to produce thorns. There's no fruit, there's no life-giving in this place anymore that he was responsible to bring. Covering the ground, this may surprise you, but I'm not a botanist. I didn't know what a nettle was until this week. I'm still not sure I entirely know what a nettle is, but I think I've grasped it. It's a big weed, basically. It's a big weed. If you read the King James, they just come right out and say it. It's a weed. But it's more than that. It's this species of weed with which there are 6 subgroups of species. And almost all of them, 5 of the 6, there are bristles on the leaves. And these bristles are actually described as being akin to a hypodermic needle. So that when you grab a hold of this plant, it stings you. And it releases histamines that go in and then create some sort of an allergic reaction, whether it's just itchiness or a rash, or sometimes it gets even worse than that. But in the place of where he should have been laying down crops, he's been totally indifferent and has allowed weeds and junk and pain to grow up. And then the wall. Point of the wall is to secure the property that God's given him. Even if he had fruit and crops growing up, the wall has been knocked down and destroyed, and there's no one to come in and take what's there. At this point, Solomon says it's at the point where poverty is going to come on him like a robber and want like an armed man anyway. They're just going to storm right past the wall that should have been there, and they're going to take it all from him. Because he's been indifferent and defeated. And when I read this passage, I totally see myself. I'm supposed to do the dishes more often than I do. And there are days when I come home from a long, hard day away from the house where I've suffered without having to care for the children or fight with them to get them to do whatever they're supposed to. It's been a difficult day for me, and I deserve to rest. And dinner's a little bit crazy and wild and loud, and I feel like I've earned a little bit of time to retire away to some quiet place and reflect upon the greatness of what I've done all day long. The dishes can wait. Well, I have a big family. It feels massive. There are 4 children. And I don't know how it's possible that my children in one meal can go through every single cup and piece of silverware in our entire house. But what once was just a small pile of dishes is all of a sudden everywhere. It's on every counter, it's on the island, it's on the floor, it's on the table, it's in the living room. And now my indifference has transitioned to defeatedness. I didn't feel like doing the dishes when there were just a few. Now my laziness has overtaken me. How am I ever going to get up the emotional fortitude to confront every dish in our home. I'm so far behind. What's the use? Costco has a lot of paper plates. Third, the lazy man is oblivious. He's oblivious to what's going on around him, right? Verse 34, poverty will come upon him like a robber and want like an armed man. He's not oblivious to the poverty or the want. He's just oblivious to when it's going to happen and how quickly and how ineffective he's going to be to stop any of it, because he has done literally nothing to prepare. Nothing. We all have a junk room in our house, or at least most of us have a junk room in our house. Does anyone know what the junk room is? Yeah. It's the place where all of our junk goes to die. And we don't know what's happening in that room. It gets overcrowded, it's dark, it's dingy, there's probably a rodent infestation. There are black widow spiders that are taking over. There's probably leaks that are creating all kinds of mold and mildew. We don't want to know what's happening in there. We don't go in there, and no one else goes in there because it's the junk room. There's a junk room in your life. We all have this vineyard. Some of us have many vineyards, right? Some of us have our work vineyard and our wife or husband vineyard and our children vineyard and our ministry vineyard, and you get the picture. And the thing is about those of us who have lots and lots of vineyards is that we couldn't possibly be lazy because we're so busy. Right? Look at all the things that we're doing. But the catch is that the busier we are, the more susceptible to laziness and slothfulness we become. I can be super on my game here, doing the ministry that I'm supposed to be doing because I get paid for it. And you know what the great thing is about doing the ministry that I get paid for, in addition to the fact that I get paid for it, is that most of the time, everybody tells me what a great, fantastic job I'm doing. And that feels really good. When I get home and I'm trying to usher my kids into some semblance of responsibility and goodness and spiritual development, and all I get back is, well, I don't want to do that. Why don't you love me? How come you don't take us to do these things? And why do I have to? You're mean. I hate you. All of a sudden, that's not fun anymore. I'd rather invest all of my time in the place where people tell me, you're doing a great job. We're so happy. I can't tell you how much what you did meant to me. All the while, I am wasting the opportunity with my children. And I'm indifferent, and I am defeated, and I am oblivious. There have been times in my life where my wife has said, you know, that comment that you made to this son, Lucas and Sam and Ruby and Benjamin, you know, you're damaging the relationship. You only have so much time. You're going the wrong direction with this. Ultimately, it's a lack of interest in stewarding the vineyard that God has put in front of me. So what's your vineyard? Is it work? Is it your employees? Are you investing in them? Is it your spouse? Are you interested in seeing, are you desperate to see fruit develop, to grow up the trellis that is your kids, to see fruit grow up the trellis that is your spouse, to see fruit grow up that is the trellis of your ministry, your spiritual growth? How about your physical well-being? I won't ask who went to Dunkin' Donuts this morning. I already know. Let's just run through this next one fast. Proverbs 26. You just have to turn the page over. It's page 548 in your Pew Bible. Proverbs 26, 13 through 16. This is one of my favorites. The sluggard says, there's a lion in the road. There's a lion in the streets. As a door turns on its hinges, so does a sluggard on his bed. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish. It wears him out to bring it back to his mouth. The sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. It's tough to know exactly what's happening here, honestly. The sluggard's telling someone that there's a lion in the road, there's a lion in the streets. So either he's crazy, that's one potential option. I don't think that's it. He's crazy and just is imagining that there's a lion out there. Or he's lying, or he's a giant excuse maker. And I think I've settled on the last. And the reason for that, the reason that I think laziness is often characterized by excuse making is in verse 14. Look where he is. He's in bed. He's in bed decrying that there's a lion in the streets. Now, you may not be familiar with 1500s BC residential construction, but there is no Chip and Joanna Gaines that are going to show up and create a massive opening in the living room with a nice header and a 4-wide French door for him to look out on the lake. It's pretty much a hut, not a whole lot of looking out to do. Actually, the roof may be open at times, and there's a door. There's not a whole lot of ability for him to see out. So my question is, how does he know there's a lion? What it really gets at is that he doesn't want to get out of bed. The lazy person has always got an excuse. You know, one of the reasons that this strikes so close to home for me is I have been diagnosed with multiple sleep disorders, and I battle. I am a world-class sleeper. I could outsleep anybody in here, I guarantee you. Regardless of 14 hours, I'll do it. 17 hours, no problem. 4-hour nap, I got it down. Because I'm a narcoleptic. I have a built-in excuse. We make a lot of excuses, and you know, some of them are valid. Sometimes the kid really was sick. Sometimes the car really did break down. Sometimes that person really didn't get their part of the project to you in time to finish everything. The lazy person always has an excuse. I have a 6 a.m. meeting with Doc Christensen on Tuesday. I have no idea how I'm going to make it there. I don't do early mornings. But I'm not going to let my narcolepsy continue to be an excuse for my laziness. Second, the lazy person only serves himself. As a door turns on its hinges, so does a sluggard on his bed. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish. It wears him out to bring it back to his mouth. I love that. It's so vivid, right? Who of us has not hit the alarm clock and then taken the blanket and just gone right back over and buried our face into the pillow, snuggled back in? It feels amazing. It's so great to go back to sleep. You know what's really good is to get up and to eat breakfast and then go back to bed. That is some amazing bedtime-ness. But that's all he's got time for. All he's got time for is what makes him feel good. Hitting the snooze bar and going back to bed. And you know what? He's not even going to get out of bed in order to get breakfast. He's going to have breakfast in bed and then go back to sleep. And you know what? The only energy he has is to reach his hand into the sour cream and onion potato chip bag and pull it back up and eat chips. There's nothing else that he has to give at all. And he's not interested in giving any more than that. The lazy person only serves himself. Dads, your kids need you to serve them. Your kids need you to talk to them, to teach them, to love them, to shepherd them, to disciple them. Your kids need that. They need that more than you need a break when you get home. And I am the chief of sinners when it comes to that. They need you. Youth, young adults, we need your energy. I'm a narcoleptic. I likely have some adrenal issues. My thyroid's maybe going. And the future from here looks bleak for me, all right? I hang out with the seniors. I know what's coming. We need your energy. We need you to be involved and integrated in saying, how come we're not pushing the gas here and charging ahead with this? We need that. Don't abandon that vineyard that God has put in front of you. Seniors, we need your wisdom. Do not disappear into the retirement life. I was busy, I served my time, I did my thing, now it's their turn. Maybe it is their turn. But we still need you. We need you to take care of the vineyard that is the younger generation. Third, he's self-deceived. The sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. No one is going to tell him his excuse isn't valid. No one is going to tell him he's not taking care of his responsibilities. Four or 5 years ago, I was in the throes of a major depression that I'd been in for years. And my wife kept coming to me and saying, there's something wrong. You got to go to the doctor. Go to somebody. Go to a counselor or a doctor, get a blood test, something. She's convinced everybody's thyroid is dying. All of you should go right now. And I wouldn't hear it. She'd say, things are falling apart. You're not interested. You're not present. The kids are suffering. I'm suffering. Wiser in my own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. Is there someone that's banging on the door of your heart saying, something's off here. Tim uses an expression often that I hate. He says, perception is reality. And what he means by that is that I can't continue to maintain that the other person is wrong. I have to at least consider that perhaps, maybe in some minor, insignificant way, they've got a point. The lazy person is self-deceived. He won't listen to anybody else's point of view. So then what's our alternative to laziness? Well, I already said it's not busyness, right? Because the busier we become, the more susceptible we are to ignoring the responsibilities that we have in each of the vineyards that God has put into our life to manage. The word that Solomon uses as a contrast to laziness is diligence. It's not work, it's not busyness, it's diligence. Let's look at Proverbs 21, verses 25 to 26. It's page 543 in the Pew Bible if you need that. Proverbs 21, 25 to 26. The desire of the sluggard kills him, for his hands refuse to labor. All day long he craves and craves, but the righteous gives and does not hold back. The diligent person serves others generously. The diligent person serves others generously. I have a friend, she's actually a couple that's a friend, and they're a little bit older than Amber and I are. And when we go to their house, there's no other house that I go to that's like this. We walk in, and she stops everything she's doing. Her name's Lynn, and she comes and she gives me a hug, and as she embraces me, she says, "Welcome," in this way that's like I'm entering into heaven, because there's guacamole and meat on the island, just like there will be in heaven. And she gives me this embrace, and it's always firm, like it's a substantial hug. And she's got kids that are going crazy and all over the place, and yet when I'm there, when there are other people there, we have her total attention. She serves us out of a generous hospitality that comes from something other than her humanity. And that is the heart attitude of a person who is diligent. They give and they don't hold back. Right? The sloth or the sluggard is described here as someone who he would take and take and take, aside from the fact that he's too lazy to even put his hands up in order to receive something. The righteous person, the diligent person, is someone who, out of the abundance of what God has put into their heart, they can't help but be a giver. They can't help but look at their family and see that there is so much that I have to give there, that I want to give there, that I desire to give there. I don't crave from them, I desire for them. I don't crave from my spouse, I desire for my spouse. I don't crave from my boss, I desire for my boss. The difference is supernatural. We have to hurry. Proverbs 13:4. It's page 536, and we'll actually stay on page 536 the rest of the time. I promise I'll get you out of here before tomorrow. Proverbs 13:4. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. You know, the soul of both of them crave. The soul of everyone has a longing and a hunger and a desire for meaning and purpose, for God. But the sluggard doesn't get anything because we're told in the verse we just looked at previously that his hands refuse to labor. His soul craves, but he's not willing to do anything in order to satisfy the craving. The diligent person is. And so one mark of the diligent person is that they prioritize spiritual habits. The diligent person is quick to be about spiritual habits because their soul desperately needs it. And there's no way that they're going to be a person that serves others generously unless they're feeding their soul. Now, that doesn't mean that a diligent person spends all of his time or her time at the church, or all of his time or her time in prayer, or all of his time or her time in Bible study. But those are big parts of the diligent person's life. Fellowship with the communion of the saints. Those are big parts of the diligent person's life. But there's something interesting about being diligent in all areas that feeds our soul. There's something that chemically happens in our brains to release endorphins. There's something that happens in our emotions when we finish a project, when we cross something off of our list, when we check a box. There's a reason that military personnel speaking at graduations are telling all of the graduates now, if you want to do something to change the world, make your bed in the morning. Because it starts them off on the footing of actually completing a task and doing something worthwhile and feeling like they've accomplished something. So the diligent person, in exercising spiritual habits, is also developing in himself or herself a rhythm by which they're accomplishing things that we wouldn't necessarily ordinarily think of as spiritual, like, for instance, making our bed or doing the dishes. Did you know that that's a spiritual activity that could feed your soul, doing the dishes? Can I get an amen, ladies? Proverbs 12:27. We just have two more. Whoever is slothful will not roast his game, but the diligent man will get precious wealth. This is so utterly absurd. Why won't he roast his game? I don't know. I don't know why he won't roast his game. Maybe he didn't actually shoot any. Maybe he wasn't willing to put the bow up and actually let it go, let the arrow go. Maybe whatever the game was disappeared into the forest and he wasn't willing to chase after it. Just assumed it must have gotten away. Maybe he didn't actually wound it fatally. You know, there are things in my fridge that would take, I don't know, a CSI team to determine what exactly they are. They've been there so long. Maybe he just left the game in the fridge so long that it just turned into liquid. I don't know. What we do know is that it seems that he had game and he never actually gets it. He has the rabbit or the turkey or whatever they have in Israel. It just never gets it, never makes it into the pot. But the diligent man will get precious wealth. The diligent person finishes his work. You know how many books I have started and not finished. I'm a seminary student. A lot. It's a lot. I was a seminary student. I'm in recovery now. You know how many times I have told my wife I was going to do something, and then I didn't? I don't know why I didn't. Out of laziness, self-love, self-interest, indifference to my wife's needs, all of that actually falls under the category of the lazy person. But the diligent person finishes his work. And lastly, verse 24 of chapter 12. The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor. The language here is military metaphor. Rule and forced labor. And the idea here is that there's a conqueror and a conquered. Presents this idea that kings would go out to war, and the people that they would conquer would then be subject to forced labor under the rule of the king. So the observation I want you to see here is that the diligent person makes himself ready. He doesn't have to say, I wish I had been prepared. You know what, I had 18 years with that kid, and I didn't start until almost the end. You know, I should have worked. I should have worked on my eyes to not look after other women. I should have looked only for my wife. And now here I am, I'm embroiled in some relationship I don't want to be. Because I didn't see it coming. I wasn't prepared. I was lazy. I didn't assess my spiritual condition. I didn't invest the time. I was indifferent. I just assumed that, you know, my defenses must be adequate, right? I'm just like every other guy. That's probably a good indication your defenses aren't adequate. A diligent person makes himself ready. He buys up all the time that he has and invests it wisely. There's one thing that I want you to do slowly today. I want to encourage you. I know I've spent this time berating the Geico sloth and the slug about their slowness. There's one thing I want you to do slowly this morning. I want you to be slow about leaving this room. I want you to take a minute. I want you to think through, what's one of the vineyards in my life that I haven't gone into in a long time? What's one of the vineyards in my life that is just in some really rough shape and that, quite frankly, I just haven't even wanted to look at? It's so overwhelming. And I want you to think about who the people are that are affected by that vineyard. I want you to just take a minute and ask the Lord, plead with the Lord for the next minute, that he would develop in you a heart of generous diligence, to be a person who gives rather than craves. Take that minute now. Father, I so want to be a person of diligence. God, I pray that you would cut out of me my desire for self-gratification and enjoyment, the impulse to meet my own interests and cravings. God, help me to turn outward, to love the way you love, to see the things that you see, and to be diligent about caring for the things that you have put in my trust. God, I pray for this body that you will help us to walk out of this room and to be diligent in a way that loves the people in our lives and brings you glory. I ask these things through the Son and by the Spirit. Amen.